Dog visits grave for years until a policeman opens it and makes a shocking discovery that changes the lives of all the town's residents. Imagine a small village, the kind where everyone knows everyone, with peaceful streets and old houses that seem to hold secrets of many generations. This is where Johnny lived, a golden-coated Labrador, large and strong, but with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of an untold story. He wasn't like other dogs who chased balls or wagged their tails at strangers. No, Johnny had a different air about him. He was serious, quiet, as if he was always deep in thought. And everyone knew why. For over 3 years, every day without fail, Johnny followed the same routine. At dawn, he would leave the house that seemed to be the only place he still recognized as his own. He walked slowly but with firm steps, crossing the entire village. It was as though he had an internal clock that wouldn't let him be late. His destination was always the same, the cemetery. When he arrived, Johnny would stop in front of a grave. It wasn't a special grave, not one of those grand ones covered in flowers. It was simple, discreet, with a grey stone covered in moss. He would lie down next to it, as if waiting for something, or maybe someone. The villagers were used to the sight, but they couldn't ignore the mix of sadness and love that Johnny seemed to convey. Children tried to play with him, calling him to run or offering treats, but he never looked away. Older residents would say, "That dog is waiting for his owner to come back. He doesn't understand that it's never going to happen." Others, touched, would respond, "Maybe he does understand, but he just can't leave behind the one he loves." Over time, Johnny's devotion became a symbol in the village. Everyone knew that this dog was experiencing a pain that words couldn't explain. It was as if he carried a mission that no one understood but no one questioned. Even on the stormiest days, there he was, lying still, as if nothing could pull him away from that place. There was something in Johnny's eyes that was hard to describe. It wasn't just sadness, and it wasn't just longing. It was a mix of pain, love, and a determination that seemed almost human. When people looked at him, they didn't just see a dog. They saw an untold story, a deep connection between him and the person resting in that grave. Many shed tears when they saw him. It was impossible not to feel something when witnessing such loyalty. But the mystery behind it all was what intrigued people the most. Who was Johnny's owner? Why did this dog refuse to move on? With each passing day, these questions circled the villagers' conversations. Some believed the answer lay buried with the person in the grave. Others thought Johnny was simply incapable of letting go of the past. And so, day after day, the Labrador continued his ritual. The sun would rise, and there he'd go. The sun would set, and back he'd walk, moving slowly as if each step was too heavy. Meanwhile, the village watched, hearts heavy, wondering what Johnny knew that no one else did. Johnny was more than a dog. He was living proof that true love never fades, even when everything seems lost. Adam had just arrived in the village. He was young, barely over 30, eager to prove himself as the new town policeman. He wasn't the type to overlook details. Anything that seemed out of the ordinary caught his attention, and it didn't take long for him to hear the stories about Johnny. Villagers spoke of the dog with a mix of admiration and sadness, but what intrigued him most was that no one knew for sure what drove such intense devotion. The first day Adam saw Johnny, he felt something stir inside him. He wasn't a dog lover, but there was something about that Labrador that moved him. The animal sat motionless in front of the grave, like a living statue. His eyes fixed on the cold stone seemed to tell a story that Adam wanted to understand. What is this dog carrying in his heart? He wondered. Johnny didn't seem like just a dog visiting a place, he seemed to be guarding a secret. As the days passed, Adam began paying closer attention to the dog. He watched Johnny leave the house he lived in alone and make his usual journey. It was like a ritual. There was something in that behavior that didn't seem to be just about longing. It felt like a mission, something Johnny couldn't ignore even after all those years. One day, while watching Johnny from a distance, Adam felt a lump in his throat. The scene was too powerful. If a dog is capable of such loyalty, what does that say about us humans? He thought. But he knew he couldn't just stand by and watch. Something was there, something that needed to be discovered, and Adam felt it was his responsibility to uncover the mystery. Maybe it was his policeman's instinct, or maybe it was something deeper, but he knew he couldn't ignore it. Adam started his investigation simply by observing Johnny's steps. He noticed that the dog always stopped at certain points before reaching the cemetery. They were seemingly ordinary places: a bench in the square, a bakery, and finally, an abandoned house on the outskirts of the village. Each stop seemed significant, as if they were markers of a memory Johnny couldn't leave behind. It was as though each place told part of a story Adam couldn't yet piece together. Intrigued, Adam began asking the villagers about Johnny's past. "Has he always been like this?" he'd ask. "Whose dog was he?" The answer was almost always the same. He belonged to Thomas, a good man who died sadly and alone. This only deepened Adam's curiosity. Who was Thomas? Why was his death surrounded by so much melancholy? And what connected Johnny so deeply to him? That night, Adam couldn't sleep well. He kept thinking about what he would do the next day. He knew he needed to learn more about Thomas and, most importantly, about his connection to Johnny. It wasn't just curiosity. It felt as if something deep within his heart was calling him to uncover the truth behind this story. After all, this wasn't just about a dog and a grave. It was about loyalty, love, and perhaps a secret the whole village had forgotten, but one Johnny refused to let be buried. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe if you love animals and their heartwarming stories. Adam decided it was time to understand more about the paths Johnny took. He knew the answer to the mystery lay in the dog's daily steps. If Johnny followed the same route every day, each stop must hold meaning. With his determination as a policeman, and now a certain admiration for the incredibly loyal dog, Adam began to closely follow the Labrador. The next morning, before sunrise, Adam parked his car in a strategic spot where he could watch the house Johnny lived in alone. As the first ray of light appeared, there was Johnny, stepping out of the rusted door. He seemed to know exactly what to do. Adam noticed Johnny wasn't just wandering aimlessly. His steps were steady, as if he were following an invisible map only he could see. The first stop was a park bench. Johnny paused there for a few seconds and looked around, as if searching for someone. Adam observed, feeling a pang of unease in his chest. Why did Johnny stop there? Did that place hold a special memory for him? After a few moments, Johnny moved on, undistracted. The next stop was in front of an old bakery, the scent of fresh bread wafting through the window. Johnny paused in the same spot and raised his head, as if waiting for something or someone. Adam could almost picture a scene from the past. Johnny's former owner stepping out of the bakery with a bag of bread, petting the dog before continuing on their way together. Was that it? Adam felt a lump in his throat. It was clear that this dog was trapped in memories only he could recall. After a few minutes, Johnny resumed his journey, and Adam kept following. The final stop before the cemetery was the most intriguing. It was an old, practically abandoned house. The windows were shattered, and weeds had overtaken the yard. Johnny stopped right in front of the rusty gate and stood still. He sniffed the air for a few seconds, as if expecting someone to open the door. Adam couldn't look away. What did that house mean? Who used to live there? After some time, Johnny started walking again and eventually reached the cemetery. As always, he went straight to the same grave, lay down beside it, and stayed silent. Watching from a distance, Adam felt his heart tighten. Each place Johnny visited seemed to tell a piece of a story. But it was a story filled with gaps, with so many unanswered questions. At that moment, Adam realized it wasn't enough to just follow the dog. He needed to understand what each of those places meant. Why the bench? Why the bakery? And most importantly, what did that abandoned house have to do with all of this? Adam felt he was getting closer to something significant, but he also knew there was still much to uncover. While Johnny lay beside the grave, Adam made a decision. He would investigate each of the places the dog visited. Something was there, something buried in the past, that still tied Johnny to this path, day after day. And Adam was determined to find the answer, not just out of curiosity, but because he felt he owed it to Johnny and the story he carried. Adam couldn't get Johnny out of his mind. Every step the dog took seemed to carry a meaning he couldn't yet understand. The bench, the bakery, the abandoned house, and finally, That solitary grave in the cemetery. No matter how hard he tried to piece it all together, Adam knew the key to understanding it all was there, in that tomb. The policeman decided it was time to dig deeper. The next morning, Adam returned to the cemetery. The sun had barely risen, and the place was enveloped in an almost eerie silence. He approached the grave Johnny had been devoted to. The cold stone bore a name, Thomas Morell, followed by a date of death. There were no fresh flowers, only moss covering part of the surface. Adam shivered. Who was Thomas? Why did he mean so much to Johnny? As he scanned the area, something caught his attention. The earth around the grave seemed slightly disturbed, as if someone had recently tampered with it. Adam crouched, carefully examining the spot. That's when he decided to dig, not entirely sure what he was looking for. Using his hands, he began to remove the soil slowly, his heart pounding faster with every movement. After a few minutes, his fingers touched something metallic. Adam pulled the object out and discovered a small, rusted box, old, but heavy. He looked around, as if expecting someone to appear, but the cemetery remained empty. Carefully, he opened the box. Inside, there was an old diary with yellowed pages. Thomas's name was written on the cover. Adam felt as though he had found a crucial piece of a puzzle. He began leafing through the diary right there, sitting beside the grave. The words written inside transported him to the past, revealing the story of a man who had been much more than just Johnny's owner. Thomas was a respected policeman, known for his honesty and dedication to his work. But at some point in the diary, the tone shifted. Thomas began describing how his life had fallen apart suddenly after being accused of a theft he didn't commit. The words were heavy with pain. Thomas recounted how he had been betrayed by people he trusted and how his reputation had been utterly destroyed. He lost his job, his friends, and eventually, his will to live. In the final days of his life, his only companion was Johnny. The dog stayed by his side as Thomas wrote about his injustice, his loneliness, and his regret for not being able to prove his innocence. Adam felt his eyes fill with tears. Thomas's story was devastating. He wasn't just a forgotten man, he was a victim of a great injustice. Johnny, it seemed, wasn't merely mourning the loss of his owner. He was guarding the memory of a man who had been destroyed by lies and betrayal. Adam carefully closed the diary as he looked at Johnny, who sat nearby watching him. It was as if the dog knew what he had uncovered. At that moment, Adam understood Johnny's devotion. He wasn't just visiting a grave. In a way, he was protesting against oblivion, keeping alive the memory of a man everyone else had abandoned. Now, Adam knew his investigation was just beginning. He needed to uncover more about what had happened to Thomas. Who were the people involved in the accusations? Why had he been accused? And, most importantly, could Thomas's name be cleared after so many years? Adam looked at Johnny again, now with a mix of respect and admiration. Thomas's story wasn't buried, it lived on in the loyal Labrador steppes and now also in Adam's heart. Adam held Thomas's diary in his hands, as if carrying the weight of an entire life filled with pain and injustice. The words written in it wouldn't leave his mind. Thomas, an honest man, had been destroyed by a cruel conspiracy. Adam knew those pages held a powerful truth, capable of changing how the village viewed its past. But he also knew that bringing this truth to light wouldn't be easy. Back at the station, Adam began organizing the information he had found in the diary. The details were shocking: names, dates, events. Thomas had not only been falsely accused but had also been a victim of influential people in the village, people who still held positions of respect in the community. Adam felt a chill down his spine. Bringing all this to light would have a massive impact. Families would be affected, reputations destroyed. He wondered, was it worth risking so much? As he pondered, Johnny appeared at the station door. The Labrador, as always, seemed to know exactly where he needed to be. He stood there, looking at Adam with those deep eyes that seemed to peer straight into his soul. Adam sighed and crouched beside the dog, stroking his head. "What would you do if you were me, buddy?" he asked softly, feeling a mix of despair and responsibility. The dilemma was real. Adam knew Thomas deserved justice. But what about the consequences? Exposing the people who had ruined Thomas's life would mean reopening wounds the village had chosen to ignore for years. Moreover, some of the figures involved were still influential, capable of retaliation if their actions were brought to light. Adam wasn't sure he was ready to face that. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore what he had read in the diary. Thomas never had the chance to defend himself in life. The only thing keeping his memory alive was Johnny's loyalty, the dog who never gave up on honoring his owner. Adam felt that, in a way, Thomas now trusted him, even indirectly. The diary was a plea for help, a last attempt to right an injustice that should never have happened. Adam spent the night awake, reading and rereading the diary's pages. With each line, he felt the weight of the decision he needed to make. He knew that exposing the truth would reopen an old wound that many would rather keep closed. But how could he turn his back on this? How could he ignore Thomas's pain and Johnny's devotion? The next morning, as the sun rose and the village began another ordinary day, Adam made his decision. He couldn't let this story remain buried. Thomas deserved justice, even posthumously, and Johnny deserved to see that his loyalty had not been in vain. Adam knew it would be a difficult journey, full of challenges, but he was willing to face them. After all, doing the right thing is rarely the easiest path. With the diary in hand and loyal Johnny by his side, Adam took the first step toward uncovering a truth many preferred to forget. He knew there was much to lose, but he also knew that Thomas's legacy and Johnny's story deserved to be told. It was time to fight for justice. Adam knew exposing the truth wouldn't be easy, but something within him pushed him forward. Maybe it was the glaring injustice Thomas had suffered. Or maybe it was Johnny's ever-faithful gaze, as if waiting for Adam to do what no one else had dared to do before. The issue was clear. Thomas needed to be exonerated, even if it meant confronting powerful people in the village. The first step was to reread the diary. Adam studied every line, every name, every date. He needed more than Thomas's words to prove his innocence. He needed concrete evidence, testimonies to corroborate what was written. And so, he began his investigation, a journey that would put him on a collision course with the village's dark past. Adam started talking to the village's older residents, those who had lived during Thomas's time. He went door to door, disguising his questions to avoid raising suspicion. Some people were willing to help, sharing vague memories, but others slammed their doors as soon as Thomas's name was mentioned. It was as if the village had made a silent pact to forget that man and everything he represented. Thomas was a good man, but he crossed the wrong people, said an elderly woman in a low, almost whispering voice. Adam realized that fear still hung over the village, even after all these years. The more he investigated, the clearer it became that Thomas had been the victim of a conspiracy. And the people who had incriminated him were some of the most respected figures in the community. Over time, Adam began finding pieces that confirmed Thomas's words. Old documents, forgotten accounts, details that seemed insignificant on their own but together painted a devastating picture. He also found a key witness, a former colleague of Thomas who had remained silent at the time out of fear of retaliation. Now older, the man decided to share what he knew. He revealed that Thomas had been accused to cover up the crimes of an elite group embezzling funds from the town hall. When Thomas discovered this, he threatened to expose them but was silenced before he could act. Each new discovery strengthened Adam's determination but also put him in danger. He knew that by stirring this hornet's nest, he was attracting unwanted attention. Some villagers began avoiding him, and he noticed he was being followed at night. Still, Adam didn't give up. Step by step, Johnny was by his side, a silent guardian, always loyal and always vigilant. After weeks of investigation, Adam managed to gather enough evidence to reopen the case. He presented everything to higher authorities, along with Thomas's diary and the testimonies he had collected. It was a tense moment, but Adam knew he had done everything he could to honor Thomas's memory. Now, all that remained was to wait. But Adam wasn't alone. As he waited for the authorities' response, Johnny continued to stay by his side, as if sensing that the moment of justice was closer than ever. Looking at the loyal Labrador, Adam promised himself he would fight to the end because some stories deserve to be told, and some truths, no matter how painful, must come to light. When the response arrived, Adam's heart raced. The higher authorities had carefully reviewed the evidence he presented. Then came the decision. Thomas's case would be reopened and his innocence finally acknowledged. For Adam, it meant that all the sleepless nights, slammed doors, and suspicious glances from the villagers had been worth it. Thomas would have the justice denied to him in life. The news spread quickly through the village. At first, there were murmurs of doubt and resistance. Some, especially those connected to Thomas's accusers, tried to discredit Adam's work. But as the facts emerged, the village had no choice but to accept the truth. Thomas was not guilty. He had been the victim of a cruel conspiracy. A ceremony was organized to restore Thomas's honor. It was simple but deeply symbolic. Adam insisted that Johnny be present. After all, no one embodied loyalty and unconditional love better than that Labrador. When the day came, the once quiet and empty cemetery was filled with villagers, all gathered around the grave Johnny had visited every day. A representative of the authorities read aloud the findings of the investigation. Thomas Morell was innocent. He had been falsely accused and unjustly treated. His memory would be officially restored, and his name cleared. As the words echoed in the air, the villagers seemed to experience a mix of shame and relief. It was impossible to ignore the injustice they had witnessed and, in many cases, accepted without question. Adam, standing by the grave, knelt and patted Johnny, who seemed to understand the moment. The dog no longer had the melancholic look that had followed him for so many years. There was something different in him now, a kind of calm Adam had never seen before. It was as if Johnny finally knew his mission was complete. After the speech, a new plaque was placed on Thomas's grave. It wasn't just a cold stone marker. It bore a silent apology from the village and the acknowledgement that the truth, though late, had prevailed. Beside the grave, Adam held Thomas's diary, which would now be preserved as part of the town's history. The villagers began to approach Johnny, some with tears in their eyes. Children stroked the dog, and the elderly murmured words of regret and respect. Johnny, who had previously ignored all attempts at interaction, now allowed the gestures of affection, as if he finally felt his struggle had ended. Adam looked at the dog and smiled. "You did it, my friend," he said softly. And for the first time, Johnny wagged his tail, as if to confirm that, yes, justice had been served. Johnny's loyalty and Adam's tireless work had given Thomas what he deserved, truth and recognition for a life lived with integrity. The village was never the same again. The story of Thomas and Johnny became a local legend, a reminder that loyalty, love, and courage can overcome even the greatest injustices. And there, in that cemetery, with Johnny by his side, Adam felt something he hadn't felt since the beginning of his journey: peace. After the ceremony at the cemetery, something profoundly changed in Johnny. The melancholic look that had accompanied him for years seemed to vanish. He was no longer the dog wandering with a silent, heavy mission. Now, there was a lightness in his movements, as if the burden he carried had finally been lifted. Johnny seemed to understand that the justice he had waited for had been delivered, and his devotion had not been in vain. Adam, who had developed a special fondness for the Labrador, had no doubts. Johnny deserved a home. Although the dog had spent years alone, it was clear he still had so much love to give. That very night, Adam brought Johnny home and prepared a comfortable corner for him with a soft bed and a bowl full of fresh food. But, to Adam's surprise, Johnny didn't immediately lie down on the bed. Instead, he stayed by Adam's side, as if to say, "Now, I'm your companion." Life together brought a new phase for Johnny. Once known for his seriousness, he began showing a more joyful and relaxed side. He wagged his tail frequently, ran around Adam's yard, and even played with the neighborhood children. It was as if he had rediscovered life. Adam, in turn, felt he had gained not just a companion but a loyal friend who understood the meaning of courage and love better than anyone. In the village, Johnny and Thomas's story became a legend passed down through generations. People told how the dog had kept his owner's memory alive for years, refusing to let injustice be forgotten. Johnny became a symbol of loyalty, inspiring everyone to reflect on the importance of honoring truth and fighting for what is right, even when it seems impossible. Adam, once just a newly arrived policeman, was now regarded as a local hero. But he always said, the real hero is Johnny. The Labrador, with his unwavering devotion, had shown the village the power of love and fidelity, something no investigation or speech could have done alone. 2 years passed, and Johnny remained by Adam's side, now a happy and cherished dog. He no longer needed to visit the grave every day, but from time to time, Adam took him there. Johnny walked calmly through the cemetery, stopping in front of Thomas's grave, as if paying a final tribute. But instead of sadness, there was peace in his eyes. The legacy of Johnny and Thomas extended far beyond the village. Their story was told in newspapers, books, and even schools, where children learned the importance of values like loyalty, love, and justice. Adam never imagined that by following a dog's steps, his life would change forever. But when he looked at Johnny, he knew their meeting was no coincidence. And so, Johnny, the Labrador who once seemed trapped in the past, became a symbol of hope. His story proved that even in the hardest moments, loyalty and true love can overcome any obstacle. Sometimes, all it takes is a determined heart, whether human or canine, to change the course of a story. Thank you for watching the video until the end. Remember to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment about the story, and give a like to help spread the word.